We are live, virtually connecting a missed conversation for the Towards Openness workshop we did at OER 17. My name is Christian Friedrich. I'm here in Hamburg, Germany. I think we should start with a quick round of introductions first. Kate, would you want to start?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Kate Green and I'm a PhD candidate at Horizon, which is a research centre for the digital economy. I have a particular interest in openness and a very big interest around privacy and data control.
All right, thanks. Ahmed, then Adam and Catherine.
So hi, I'm Ahmed Karoufa. I'm a lecturer in Open Lab in computing science in Newcastle University. My work is basically on using technology for education, so technology enhanced learning. That's my main interest and research field.
All right, thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Autumn Keynes. I am the Associate Director of Academic Technology at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm also a co-director of Virtually Connecting. And yeah, I'm very interested in privacy and security on the internet, and especially in terms of what it means for digital citizenship and our rights and responsibilities as individuals online.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Cronin. I work at the National University of Ireland in Galway, and I'm also a PhD student exploring open educational practices in higher education. And my particular interests are around critical approaches to openness, digital identity, and open practices in general.
Well, thank you. Then let's maybe Chris, Jeffrey, and then Yin, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. My name is Chris Gilliard. I'm coming to you from Detroit. I'm a community college professor, and mainly my interests are in privacy and how technological decisions and pedagogical decisions influence often negatively lower income folks and persons of color.
All right. Thank you. Jeffrey, would you like to introduce yourself quickly, briefly? If you can move any closer to the microphone, I think that would be great, but we'll give it our best. Slightly.
I'll just wave. How's that? There.
All right. Yin, would you want to?
Sure, I'll go first.
Thank you.
So I'm Yin-Hua Kriher. I'm, well, dialing in from Urbana-Champaign in Illinois. I work at the University of Illinois there, and so I'm kind of close to, I want to say Autumn, a little bit close to Detroit too. We're all kind of in the Midwest. I work as an e-learning specialist. I'm trained in instructional design. I want to say my interest is, interest lies at the intersection of instructional design, access, culture, and a little bit of learning science. So multiple interests. But I'm very interested definitely in privacy and all that because of what I do in my university in e-learning. So I want to see how, you know, I can learn more and apply that to my job. So, yep.
Thank you.
I think Christian's checking something, so I'll just introduce myself while he does that. All right, great. So I'm Mahabeli. I'm an associate professor of practice at the American University in Cairo. And my work is mainly faculty development, so I help other people with their teaching, but I just have a general interest in openness. And I just got a course approved for teaching digital literacies. And I think there should be a part on that about privacy, not privacy, but privacy because we're an American university. And I'd be curious. I'm always curious about what you guys are doing. Kate and Christian, you do really interesting work. It was a very interesting workshop, and I couldn't stay until the end. So I'm really interested in having this conversation, seeing what other people are thinking about it right now.
All right, thank you. Jeffrey, would you want to give it another shot, or should we just move ahead? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so what we thought for, or what Kate and I basically came up with and wanted to put it up for discussion for tonight's session was that we give a quick introduction to the workshop. I mean, we have on-site participants here in the session, as well as 2 of our 4 provocateurs. Thank you for joining. And to basically give a brief overview of what it is that we actually did on site, and then really move over quickly and see what we can do with that from here on out, and see what we can take away from that for our own practice, but also from the interventions that were designed, maybe if you had a chance to look at them, but also just what comes to mind when looking through the provocations for this session. So Kate, would you want to start introducing what it is that we actually did there?
Okay, I can give it a go. So Christian, Markus, and myself, we kind of gave a quick overview of what Towards Openness is. So just as a real brief overview again, is that it's kind of meant to be about culminating research, culminating ideas, particularly from people in the education sector, around issues or kind of tensions around openness, and we would like to kind of gather those and kind of take them to people who can make a difference and say, like, these are the problems and we have some solutions. And we've kind of been working on this for about a year now, but it started about, it actually started around OER 16, and then Christian came over to where I work and we kind of started moving on from there. And we've done 2 workshops since. I mean, it's not a project that is funded. We kind of been doing it in our spare time, and it's been great. So we did a workshop at OEB 16 that Christian was at and I was remote, and we both obviously were together for OER 17. But basically the format of the workshop is that we asked people beforehand from different kind of demographics, from different perspectives, to kind of bring their thoughts around whatever the topic was. So for OER 17, it was around the politics of open and openness and safety in online and open learning. And so we asked Ahmed and Chris, they're both here, and Sarah and Rob Farrow as well. So in the workshop, we listened to all 4 of these provocations. They were all about 2 or 3 minutes long, I think. And then we kind of just said, okay, so let's have a discussion in groups about kind of what resonates with you, what do you bring from your practice? And then we kind of basically asked, okay, for the next 20 minutes, I think it was, we only had an hour, so it wasn't a very long session, but to think about what might we do about it. So whether that's an intervention that can be done, or whether it's more of a kind of fantastical thing that, would need a lot more work to make it a reality. But we had 3 groups and we had some great responses. I don't know if Christian, you want to kind of take over and say what kind of came of those?
I would just I'm happy to do that, and also just stress the fact that, I mean, we had a 20 or 25, 30-minute work window, so to speak, including presentations. So this was not really intended to be about output or outcomes at all. It was more about process and reflection of what it is that these provocations entail somehow. And still, you can tell how different teams approach these questions very differently, and also try to reflect on that differently. And we had one group that was well, I think profited very much of the availability of Brian Mathers. They came up with great drawings and all that, and they basically designed a dashboard that was Brian Lamb, Jim Groom, Rob Farrow, and Brian Mathers, and they basically designed a counter data surveillance dashboard in which they would give in which they empower the single user basically to take over, at least partially, control over their own data, and give some of that control back, and to visualize that so that most internet users would actually understand that. Then on the other hand, we had the team of you, Autumn, and also Maha and Jeffrey, where you came up with somehow an intervention that meant for other people, and I'm happy to let you rephrase that. I'm pretty sure you're better at that. Where you basically came up with the next step for virtually connecting itself, and also taking that from a privacy and safety perspective. And then the third intervention was basically very much of the discussion in big data is focused around signal and the noise. And the third intervention basically is to deliberately create noise in order to distract from the signal. So if we all created so much data that the actual data that is supposed to be used will be useless. And those were the three very interesting, at least from my perspective, very interesting provocations, but I'm happy to let you take over now. I mean, especially like the different approaches that you had, and the provocations were really interesting. And hi, Francis, great that you're joining. So I don't know, I mean, it was interesting for me also. Yeah, I was going to ask you, Chris, you, with the provocation you did, you really put Zubov's laws kind of in the center of it all. And that resonated really well with especially the group around Jim Groom, and they referenced your provocation, not just once, but I think close to 10 times.
Yeah, so I was able to read Jim's post today, and you know, I'll be totally honest, I really struggled to come up with something, but I mean, you know, and again, I apologize to everyone for the basement hacker ethos of my video, but I had just given a talk out west, and I was really I've been thinking quite a lot about Zuboff and the notion of surveillance capitalism, and as we talk about each new, and I put new in parentheses, but each new thing we talk about in terms of the web, right? I think about how it gets absorbed into sort of what the dominant workings of the web, which are to absorb as much data as possible and find ways to monetize it and store it until you do. And so my caution, right, my provocation is how can we avoid that when we talk about open resources and open practices? Because even in my sort of brief poking around, I started to see all these giant companies say, oh, well, we do open. And I thought, well, wait, this doesn't, because their goal is to make a whole bunch of money. So how can, like somewhere that gets turned into, somewhere that gets monetized, and the sort of like the dominant narrative or the dominant like mode is to collect data and monetize it. So that's where I came from with that. That's how I started thinking about it.
Chris, I think we didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. Oh, or maybe, I think we can we're getting audio from you, but I can't hear your voice.
Francis, you can probably hear us, can't you?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think what Maha was saying, but her audio was a bit chopped up, that you would, since you came in a bit late, that if you want to do a brief introduction of yourself, who you are and where you're based and all that.
Yeah, that's fine. Hi. Well, I call myself an itinerant scholar, which means that I retired a few years ago and I can do what I like now and just wander around. And I'd missed the original workshop as I was part of a panel running in parallel. So in preparation for this event, I read the abstract the blog posts and viewed the video provocations, and I reflected on the process model that you published in the lead up towards openness. And I really liked the part that said, create and share a realistic or fantasy intervention prototype tool process. And my personal motivation was based on me tending to talk too much, was to participate differently in inclusive conversation, as well as changing my actions. I'm imagining a counter to algorithmic shaping of the conversation online. And I was really influenced by Chris's provocation that he shared. So first of all, I thought of a human algorithm, or even a humane algorithm. I like the human bits, but think we can do better than the fixedness of the algorithm. And that's enough for now. If possible, I'd like to share a little more at the end of the session if there's time.
That sounds interesting. Thank you. Ahmed, I don't want to, how do you say that, call you out, but it must have been interesting from your perspective to basically watch from the outside what is happening at the conference, partially due to your own provocation as well.
Yeah, so I think one of these suggestions was like this telepresence robot, and in fact for the conference in the US, I have registered as a telepresence robot because they made this offer to me as an alternative. So yeah, so happy to say that I will be there as a robot, and they've asked me to send something to personalize the robot. I'm not sure what I'm going to send, but I think it makes a good opportunity to talk to people about what's happening, because you don't often see a robot wandering around in a conference. But the thing is, initially when they offer these robot alternatives, as if that makes everything fine because we've just given you this alternative. It doesn't, but I think it's an opportunity to talk about it and to actually do engage. So it is like a compromise, but it doesn't mean that things are okay now because you can't do that. So yeah, I was just like interested that this is the proposition that someone made, and actually this is what's going to happen.
Well, and the other thing is that the problem with robots, with people who've tried them in the past, is how people on site respond to them as they would respond to your human presence.
In my experience, we do have a robot in our lab, and we do give access to people. It is a massive step forward compared to normal Skype, because the form factor and the fact you do wander around people, it makes it more natural, and I'm surprised at how naturally people treat it as almost like a human. So our experience with it has been positive. So yeah, I've never been on the controlling side. I've always been on a side of talking to a robot. I've never been the robot. So that will be an interesting experience.
But is this a computer science or a human-computer interaction type of conference?
Yes, yes.
The kinds of people there are more techie and more willing to say.
Yeah, so they will not be surprised to seeing that, and they've offered it to a number of people who couldn't come. Yeah, so the type of people who are used to these kind of things.
I'd like to jump in and just kind of clarify, because there's some folks even in the chat who are asking what is a telepresence robot, and there might be people who are watching now or might watch in the future who might ask this question too.
Well, if they've seen Big Bang Theory, they've seen Sheldon do one of the episodes as a telepresence robot.
So I've seen robots that are sort of autonomous and on wheels, and it's like an iPad, and then they can like roam around, but I've also seen the ones that you set on the table, and then they can just like turn and zoom. So what have they offered you for this conference? And can you tell us?
So this one will be, it's the conference called CHI, Computer Human Interaction. It's organized by ACM, which is the Association for Computer Machinery. It's the biggest and the most prestigious conference in computer human interaction. So it's a massive, massive conference.
Wow.
And it's the type of robot will have like a screen and on wheels, and I just control it remotely, so I can move it around, mingle with people, and talk to people.
So I have to ask you though, do you have a human counterpart who's going to help your robot around? Like what happens if your robot falls down the stairs or like?
Don't really know. I mean, I know that there are a number of people from our lab will be there, so hopefully they can help, but I'm not sure if the organizers provide this service, so hopefully I will not trip as a robot. I'll see if I'll be more social because I'm not that social in conferences, so that would be interesting. Some people call it iPad on wheels, so it's basically you can imagine it as an iPad the height of a person that you can move around. So
I've had bad experiences with being in a robot. That said, it was really more of a sales demo kind of experience than like really people who were interested in talking to me directly. But like I found myself in a situation where like I was all of a sudden in the middle of a trade show. And the people who were on site were really looking at me as an object more so than anything else, right? So they're coming up and like, they're like this basically. And I'm like, hi, how are you? Hello. And they're like, huh, wow. And then they like walk away. I'm like, what just happened? I don't know if they thought I was recording maybe or what, but I'm like, hello, I'm like trying to interact with them and they were just like, Jeffrey, that's the story of my life. Yeah, right. It felt very natural to me. This happens to me face to face all the time.
So hopefully this will not happen because I think they're used to using these robots in these conferences for a couple of years now.
It sounds like it might be the right type of conference. Yeah, but yeah, it would be great to hear your experience.
I'm wondering if they have to do some certain like accessibility requirements so that the robot doesn't trip. So there will be no stairs, you know, where all the sessions are on the same floor. They'd have to be, right? Because how are you going to get up the stairs? Unless you switch robots to go to another, you can be teleported to another floor. Because you don't want the robot to be going up and down the stairs. But I just have a question for you, Ahmed. Do you know about virtually connecting? Do you know what we do beyond this session?
Sorry?
Do you know about virtually connecting? Do you know what we do beyond this?
Yeah, I've read today a bit on your website. So it seems that you provide a service. I'm not sure how similar it is, but you provide support for these kinds of things. That's my understanding.
Yeah. We're a volunteer organization. Organization, we're movements, whatever we are. We're a group of people that evolved because I can't make it to a lot of conferences, basically. Not because of getting visas refused, although that might happen this year. But but because just I can't travel a lot. But now a lot of people are making use of this, and it's just that instead of, this is not for giving presentations, but more for having conversations with people on site, so that we just have, instead of all of us here being virtual, like all of us here are at home or in our offices or whatever, but one group of people would be in the conference itself, and they'd have a conversation with us. And so it'd be that part, when you're saying you don't know how social you're going to be, it's for that social part. But the nice thing is that there's always one of us on site connecting everyone to each other and facilitating that conversation, so sort of making it a little bit easier to socialize with the people on site and making it easier for the people on site to socialize with us. And that's what we normally do. But we also end up, because there's so many of us in different parts of the world, we end up presenting together in a hybrid form where some of us are on site and some of us aren't.
Sounds very useful.
But the robot experience hasn't been good so far, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes in that conference.
Always time to learn.
Yeah, okay, we'll see. Definitely.
I love the idea of the robot. I just think that you have to have the right culture for it. So it sounds like you're going to a conference that's going to have the right culture for it. But I also think that you can't underestimate the need for the humans to sort of set the robots up and set the tone when the robot is in the room. Like, this is not a robot. There's a person in there, I mean, like, I ended up in this situation where I essentially was a robot and there was nobody advocating for me. And so I was totally objectified, right? I was like, hello, trying to like interact with people, and people were just completely ignoring me because I was just a product.
Well, yeah, as you said, this is the
Can I ask a question related back to the workshop?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I was intrigued by a couple of things. One is, for anybody who wasn't at the conference last week, it was very frustrating being at the conference because there were so many good sessions on and you couldn't go to them all. So I was in the building and wasn't able to go to the workshop because I was, I was attending a session with someone else whose work, whose research I'm related with. So I didn't go to the workshop, but I loved the idea of Chris and Ahmed and all the provocations, because it kind of put artifacts out there that people could interact with before, during, and after the workshop. And also I was really intrigued with what came up during the workshop, although I haven't seen them all. I can note here in the chat. So I'm just wondering, kind of, Kate and Christian, kind of what you were surprised by or maybe inspired by in terms of what came up with the workshop, and where you see this going, because I would like to remain involved, but I'm not really sure what form that will take.
Sure. I think a lot of, I mean, from the provocations, I mean, two of them are kind of, well, the two of the outcomes, I say, like the interventions were around these ideas of surveillance. And I think like the day after, we were actually in Coventry kind of talking about the workshop again, and again, the conversation of surveillance comes up. So it feels like this is at the moment sort of a real big talking point. Nobody really seems to have any kind of solutions, and I don't think there's ever going to be a solution, to be honest, as long as we're going to stay online and using whatever resources are available. As we all know, unfortunately, if a resource or something is free, it isn't in other respects. So I mean, just kind of today coming on to virtually connecting, which is, you know, open in a lot of ways. I had to change my browser, and then even then when I tried to log in, it was saying, well, you have cookies turned off, you must turn them on. It just felt like there's a lot of barriers for me to actually, you know, as somebody who is very privacy conscious, I had to kind of take a lot away from my own privacy to be able to participate. And that's something that I find really tricky. And I think that those sorts of conversations were starting to emerge throughout the workshop, and then certainly afterwards as well. In terms of where we're going next, we're kind of still trying to decide.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what for me, just to add to that, would be that we offered a very similar workshop at OEB, and Maha, among others, delivered great provocations that were, at least in terms of format, quite similar to what we had, like a 3 to 5 minute provocation. We did it by sound only because the conference organizers there were more cautious about integrating people from the outside, which is an issue, I think, that especially initiatives or communities like Connecting can disrupt also. But also we tried to simplify it a bit. And what happened then was that I think the audience we had in the workshop itself, the participants in the workshop we had, were much more interested in actually working something out and working through those gray zones between openness and privacy, if there are even between openness and privacy. And what it is we're doing with, like, we ran both those sessions under the Towards Openness theme, and as Kate said, like for me personally, the OER 16 session that you were a part of as well, I think, Catherine, was for me personally the starting point when we thought about drivers and dimensions of openness and their different aspects, and how can you be open on one dimension, on one driver basically, and not open on the other, and what risks does that expose you to. But we are hoping to have something here that in itself becomes a resource as well for others. So if it were up to us, I think, and we will have to get better about documenting it, others would be able to use modular resources, but also the workshop concepts itself in order to trigger thoughts about this, but also to expand this into different themes, because only the privacy and safety and security and online learning are certainly one major aspect of what it is that we deal with every day as educators and online educators, but there are other issues as well related to openness, and to expand into those fields as well, prospectively at least.
Oh, okay. So I was asking about 0 degree the 0 degree notion in OER. And the reason I asked that, and I'm sorry, Kate, I missed a tiny bit of what you said because my daughter was talking to me, but when I'm thinking about Jim Groom's group, and what they came up with was a sort of a data dashboard that the idea that there could, and it goes along the lines of a fantastical intervention, but it was fun to look at and think about anyway. The idea that we could have some kind of party who would monitor and report back to users of platforms like Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And so for instance, Facebook would essentially tell you what you're getting when you're volunteering different pieces of your privacy. And I do use the word volunteer because they would give you the option of adjusting the levels of things that you gave, the types of information you gave them. And the other part of that is that there would be a company, so we wouldn't be left just to sort of trust Google or trust Facebook. There'd be a company that would essentially be the company that was the middle actor in between users and Facebook, or users and Google. And the reason I asked about the 0 degree thing is because what Kate was saying is that, and so I know open's not all about free, okay? Like I want to get that out of the way, but I am always struck in thinking about cost, right? And I hate to use this cliche in some regards, but the cliche that if you're not paying for it, you're the service, right? So that how do we, what are we giving up? Okay, so who benefits, right? So if the money is not being made in textbooks, and especially again, as I mentioned earlier, with companies coming in, like Pearson or something like that, saying they do open, right? If they're not making the money in textbooks, where are they making the money? I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect that in general, it would follow along with the sort of typical chain that we see now with other platforms that are free. And so that's, when we talk about 0 cost or 0 degree, I mean, usually we're talking about dollars or some form of a currency, but there are other forms of currency like your privacy. So that's why I was thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and something that I keep having conversations with people, because I also did a presentation the day before the workshop about Privacy UG, which is the open secret class that I did, and I had people saying, how can I do this? How can I have a conversation with my students about privacy, about control, about data, and those conversations, because they're really difficult to have, and they are. And it's really interesting that we're kind of having a conversation around kind of education and educational tools and those sorts of things, but there is kind of this beyond education, right? And that all of these services aren't just limited, we know obviously, but these conversations go much further, and we need to kind of make sure that people kind of understand it in that sense. I'm not saying that students don't know, but having these conversations are kind of needed, I think, at the moment. Yeah, that's my 2 cents, just in response. Francis, did you have something that you wanted to say? So I'm just looking through the chat.
So I do have a question to raise, and so something I've thought about all the time, because I work with students in the university, undergraduates and graduates. Undergraduates tend to be students who, especially freshmen and so on, they're minors, and they're not even, 18 yet. And so the impact of all this surveillance, on students, and further on, with the laws that we have in the US, FORPA and all that, I often wonder how I could create, how I could enable them to, or help instructors to design courses that would be more open and engaging, but I'm often held back because of all these laws. So I often wonder, what do you do? And because I work in a public university, I have to take FERPA training that shows that I'm aware of all these laws that kind of, I feel like my hands are tied. So what do you all, have to say about that and what I can do?
Unfortunately, I'm not so caught up on your laws and legislation, unfortunately. But
yeah, to everyone here, what do you do about that?
Yeah, but because it comes back to this idea, well, not idea, but informed consent, right? And I've been working recently with much younger people actually who can't give full informed consent because they're not 16 yet, even though I don't really agree that people of 16 years old can really also give informed consent, but whatever, that's the age it is, at least in the UK. And then you kind of say, well, if you can't give informed consent, then your parents have to give informed consent, which then it kind of means that you're having conversations that are for different age levels, but it's kind of the same conversation, right? Because my parents don't understand these things that are going on. I'm trying to explain to them, and I'm still learning, and I don't have the answers. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to say about it. But
I was just going to say that a terms and conditions that's more than 5 lines long cannot possibly be, because like, how many people actually read it, and how many people understand it, and is it meant to be understood? Like, why can't someone just say
Agreed.
point to the part that I'm supposed to worry about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I got informed consent from the people that did my class, and they're all over 18, and it wasn't, I say, not a big issue, but I got their informed consent so I could use their Twitter data that they had used in an open class. But the thing is, it's kind of, yeah, they've consented to me doing exactly what I've said I'm going to do with their data. But the thing is, we're using another party, right? So we're using Twitter, and then we've got to kind of go into their terms and conditions, and they're just so opaque about it. And it's crazy disjointure between the things that we have to do as researchers, which is great and fantastic, but then the things that we're working with are just so lucrative. Like, how do we work with these systems and have an informed, consensual kind of experience?
So I struggle with this a lot. Especially because a couple of years ago, I found out that this guy, Chris Gilliard, lives in my hometown, and I started talking to him, and he started bringing all this stuff up to me, and I was like, oh my God, what are we doing to students, right? And I teach a first year seminar on digital citizenship, right? So I ask students I give them a domain, I do a domains project in that. We talk about these kind of things. So like Meha says, terms and consent, giving real consent isn't, a terms and conditions that's like all of this information. But in my class, I can tell the students, I can assign this to them, right, is like actually reading this stuff and picking it apart before we put them in. The other thing that I always do, and some instructors that I work with have a hard time, because it's a lot of work if somebody, and I haven't had anybody who's done this, but I always give everybody a way out. If you don't want to be on Twitter, I'm not going to force you to be on Twitter. If you don't want a domain, I'm not going to force you to be in a domain. We'll find another way. We will figure that out. But I wanted to throw this back to Yin a bit, because I see there's some side conversation going on here. And if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about FERPA specifically that you're having a problem with, because FERPA is a big law. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of different pieces. I know I saw it come by that you're having problems with blogging, but can you articulate a little bit more specifically what you're having problems with?
I wouldn't say I have problems with it, but just the interpretation of it. My interpretation of it is that student information is considered private information, and anything that counts as a student record cannot be publicized, cannot be shared if it's not considered public data. So, for example, if we want them, if we support openness in learning, and anything that is a student education record, for example, blogging is considered as, if it's assessed, if it's an assessment, then it's a student education record. So then we cannot encourage that, because then it might go against, FERPA laws, right?
Now, Illinois, not a lawyer, but Illinois has some, as a state, has some laws that are typically a little bit more restrictive in terms of some of this stuff. But I am not familiar with FERPA covering something like blogging. So if that is the that being the case is actually quite a surprise to me.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I'm now. I should state that I occupy what's rather an extreme position, or I at least announce it as extreme. That I don't think that we have the right, and you know, I'd be interested to hear what Kate says this, and I don't think we have the right to. And I think we need to be very, very careful when we enlist students into a relationship with the technology. And so for anybody who didn't see my provocation, what I talked about was Zubov's notion of surveillance capitalism, which is basically the idea that everything we do online is collected and turned into data and monetized. And so what the ramifications of that are for our practices online, including when in education and discussions of open and OER. And so I think that we need to be super careful when doing these things and offer students options, and especially do as much as we can, even given the kind of the level of information asymmetry, you know, what companies know about us and what we think they know about us and what we know about them. I think we need to be really careful when saying to students, you must use X technology, and that where they need to occupy a space on the web.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Chris, and just, you know, very powerful at a number of different levels. And you used the word options there about giving student options, and Jeffrey, you alluded to that as well. And I think that's the key, is about making sure that students have choices. And certainly one of my philosophies has always been that I identify as an open educator, and I make particular choices, and I'm very deliberate about exposing, you know, what I think about when I make those choices, and we engage with discussion, you know, about what those choices mean for different people. But you know, I'm a networked educator, and our course will be networked. So our course will be a node on the network, but I don't require the students in the class, you know, that I'm teaching to be a node in the network. They make that personal decision themselves. So nothing that is credit bearing requires the students to do that. So yet it's modeled in everything that we do. And I think that's, for me, that's the philosophy that has worked in kind of preserving the agency of students to choose when and where and how to be open.
That's good. Thank you. So a balance of agency with access and equity.
Just want to pick up on something that Chris has just said in the chat about being out there poses very different risks for different folks. And I think that's kind of segues quite nicely into the sort of the conversation or the provocation that Ahmed brought to the table, right? I mean, I can't help but kind of describe that. I'm not sure if it was deliberate, Ahmed, but that you were sat in front of a completely like white wall. Like we wouldn't be able to tell where you were. I don't think you even said where you were from either. I don't know whether any of that was deliberate or not, but obviously like for yourself, you being online, you know, does pose some safety and security risks. And then of course, you know, that kind of transpires with us students and everyone really for that matter. But.
Yeah, it was all deliberate. Yeah, I tried two reasons. Yeah. One of them is I didn't want to make it about myself specifically. I want to make it like a general issue. At the same time, yeah, I prefer not to share all the personal details because of process I'm going through involves like security checking and things like that. So yeah, so it was deliberate.
So I'm just going to say something that I was saying on the text chat, is that I was trying to figure out how to spell the name of the author for the surveillance capitalism, and I ended up on Wikipedia, and I discovered that the Wikipedia page on surveillance capitalism is under threat of deletion. And so I remember Francis having said on Twitter that, that we want to do some fem edtech Wikipedia editing and feminist editing on Wikipedia. I don't know what they're called. They're called feminist editathons, I think. And so this might be one of the things that we try to do, because I don't know what their criteria are. So we first need to learn, because it's a pretty big article with lots of references, and I don't understand why it's under that threat of deletion.
Yeah, this is the first I've seen of that, so thanks for pointing that out.
That's quite something. So,
oh, look at that. So I wanted to bring something up if I could. Is it all right if I jump in for a second? So thinking about Ahmed's provocation and our response, because there's a lot of us who are here. It was me and Mehe and Jeffrey and Suzanne, I believe, who were a part of that group. And I feel like what we came up with was really an extension of virtually connecting. We sort of started with virtually connecting. Mehe even said after listening to your provocation, Ahmed, that she felt like you were kind of giving a commercial for virtually connecting in a way, or you were like laying out the reasons why we have virtually connecting. And so we went a little bit further with some of that. But then, like I just heard Kate say that, she had a hard time participating in this session because she had to turn off a lot of the things. And so to be self-critical a little bit, like I think that we focused more on the openness than we did on the security, but I also think it's a great opportunity for us to maybe talk about how we could be a little more aware of that and virtually connecting. What are some of the things that we could do? Even thinking about just the provocation, or even really thinking about virtually connecting in ways that we could be a little bit more welcoming to people who are concerned about these issues.
So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I think that's one of the...
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't have any comments. It's great to come to the rescue.
I was going to say, I think that's one of the paradoxes of a lot of the stuff we do. Because to beat that drum, I mean, the technologies that we use sort of enforce their ethic upon us, right? Like, so we have the notion of connecting each other, but we're also sort of indicting each other at the same time, right? Like, now it's clear where everyone is, what they're doing, what they're saying. There's a record of it. And, I won't speak for anyone else, right? For me in this place, in this time, it's not threatening. But I don't know that there are ways to participate in something like virtually connecting, or a lot of networking things we might do without, to some degree, putting ourselves at risk, whether it's from, like a lot of times, for instance, I don't mention my institution, and that's like a small scale, right? I'm unlikely to get fired, but I don't do that as just that little bit of sort of friction between who I am as a scholar in public and who my institution, or say, legislators in my state might want me to be. And so, yeah, I think that's always sort of the interesting difficulty or paradox with talking about these things, because risk is different for everybody, but the technologies impose their version of that on us, rather than us getting to choose that.
Yeah, and just to touch up on that, if I may, just and I'm not sure how to say this without like it coming off the wrong way, so apologies in advance. But I wrote a short blog post before OER 17 actually, saying that I personally have never been harassed or threatened online, right? So I'm like the part or a white heterosexual in his mid-30s doesn't really run into that many risks online, and I am I am on Twitter, I'm present online, and offering or even facilitating a workshop on this topic then kind of, and that might be a lack of vocabulary here, but almost feels not hypocritical, but is somewhat, feels a bit strange somehow, so to speak. And I'm just going to put that out there. But also, it feels like, and we had this discussion on the Friday after the OER in Coventry with Kate, among others, where I basically said, well, it's also hard for me to convince people like me that this is an issue. So how do I do that? And how do I convey those risks to those who have never been who have never felt exposed to them, who might have been exposed but who have never felt that? And also, and you can put this on a personal level, but you can also put this on an institutional level, in terms of surveillance, for example. So we had this discussion about what Coventry does and how they reference data from student passes, how, I don't know, the cafeteria or the library are accessed with the data from the LMS. And my university doesn't even have a LMS. So if they wanted to reference that data, they would have to export CSV files and so there's not even a conversation going on about that. And then there are people like me, again, who talk about or risks that we have never perceived. So I don't even know what my question is really. I'm just wondering what your take is on that, in terms of how do you, are there any good practices out there that basically show that? So I think I heard a podcast today where you can basically mimic harassment in messaging systems by basically writing short stories that are then displayed as those. So that might be a tool in terms of storytelling. But how do you, what's your take on that?
I don't really know what your question is, but I had a knee-jerk reaction as you were asking it. But my knee-jerk reaction as you were saying it, and I think you're already doing that, and I'm just wondering how you can do it institutionally. My knee-jerk reaction is bring out the voices of the people you're talking about. So it's not about Christian saying this, it's about Christian showing you what this other person does. And you do that in your workshops with the provocations, so you're always asking out other people's voices into the room, right? And I don't know if you were talking about these stories. If it's someone who's at risk in making themselves not anonymous, then you could sort of do what I like to call semi-fictional narratives. So they are true stories of people, but you modify them slightly. I think Frances has done this as well. And maybe she could speak more to that in the chat or orally, whichever makes her more comfortable. I don't know if that helps with what you're trying to say. But I think the point is, yeah, you looking like them, telling them the same thing, they might not necessarily get where you're coming from, but maybe the true stories of other people.
I also think that it's really interesting when you talk about risk, because the feedback loops of being online are so obfuscated that how are we supposed to know if we do this, what does that mean, you know? And because that isn't transparent to us, then it becomes extremely difficult. I mean, thinking about my kind of research focus at the moment, which is actually more around kind of chronic health communities, it's kind of how do you get across the point that what you might say here could have an effect here, but there isn't really any proof, but it's possible, right? So it's kind of, I have a difficulty in kind of explaining what risk is and what risk can look like. And then because a lot of the companies won't, you know, admit to have any kind of responsibility to it. and also whether they're even, whether they know about it anyway. So because as we know, machine learning algorithms, they kind of keep learning for themselves. So what is actually happening in those black boxes? I mean, who really knows? Several iterations after it's been, first code. But yeah, that's kind of a difficulty that I'm personally having. So
a couple things real quick. I mean, Christian, I'll tell a quick story. I have a friend who's an attorney in Arizona, and I managed to get him on Twitter and off of Facebook, and he started following a lot of Black women on Twitter, and I convinced him just to be quiet and just follow people. And, so he came to me a couple days ago and said, oh, I learned so much. I didn't know, for instance, that there was this rift between, Black feminists and white feminists, or, feminists of color and white feminists. And, I'm hesitant to use some of this language that I'm about to use, but if people are unaware of some of the issues in terms of risk and the dangers of being online, I mean, I would suggest that they're just not listening, or not listening to the right people. I mean, there's so much out there, and I agree with Maha that you're doing the work, right? But it's incumbent upon those people to also do their own work. And there are so many voices out there if you are willing to listen to them. I forgot my other point, but that's that's the main thing I wanted to say.
So maybe in talking about our classes, a lot of times in these classes we talk about getting students a blog and getting them on Twitter, right? I think maybe we need to focus on teaching students how to listen, and how to listen to different constituencies. If we're going to also be asking them to post and project their feelings, we also have to teach them how to listen.
I thought of the other thing I was going to say.
Hooray!
Chris gets to talk some more. No, I just wanted to bounce a little bit off of what Kate said, and I come back to this often because whenever I tell people that I'm interested in privacy, almost inevitably they say either, "Oh, it's dead, didn't you hear?" or, "Well, I don't have anything to hide." And quickly to one way to think about that is that just because you don't, let's say they don't, let's say that, they gladly give the government and Google and me, the keys to their apartment and all their passwords and all that. Let's say, for instance, that's true. That to assume that the way I exercise my rights is the only way, or the way that everyone should, or that everyone is free to exercise them in the ways that I do, is really a failure of empathy on the part of that person, right? Like, even if that's true, that you have nothing to hide, right? Like, that is a level of privilege that is only imagined by 99% of humanity. So we need to sort of not let people off the hook when they say things like that.
So Francis, please say it out loud, because people watching will be able to see this, and it's really valuable.
Okay.
I think you are muted again, Francis.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
There you are.
Yeah. Okay. In preparation for this session, I looked at what you had in the lovely Towards Openness workshop that I couldn't attend because I was presenting elsewhere. And this is based on my participation in the the Journal Club organised by the lovely Laura Gosia. And so this was my little sort of set of rules of thumb that I came up with. In a 1 hour synchronous conversation online, I will listen. I minimize my speaking and maximize my listening. I will prepare. I research in advance and note 3 points that I might respond to. I will wait. I'll make one of these points as a statement, being prepared to bring in the others in response if relevant within the flow of the conversation. And lastly, I'll reflect and report back via a blog post or Twitter comments.
And so that explains why Francis has not been speaking a lot in this session.
I should have said that's because I talk too much.
You did say that, but I don't think of you as someone who talks too much, maybe because I talk more.
I'm saying nothing, Maha.
That's interesting.
So I'll jump in just because it's that time of the day when the bright light comes in and my angelic, my office becomes my angelic background. I think that your process, Francis, is very. I feel a certain kinship to it. Like I think that it really kind of articulates a bit of the ethos that I try, but I'm never that. Like I never try. I'm more spontaneous than that, right? Like I can't really see myself sort of planning it out like that beforehand. I think that there's a lot of value in doing that, and I commend you for doing it, but I don't know if it would really fit in with my personality personally. But I love the fact that you're doing that, and I love the fact that you articulated it like that.
Okay, there's a conversation happening in the chat that I want to respond to because it's about someone called Glenn Greenwald, and I'm sorry, I've never heard of that person. But that they say, if you have nothing to hide, give me all your emails. And at the beginning, I wasn't sure what they meant. They don't mean email addresses, obviously. They mean the actual emails, like the text of the emails. And then Chris was also saying, if you have nothing to hide, give me all your passwords. And I was thinking that this is actually a practice that is starting to happen, isn't it? Like they're saying, if you're going to the airport, they'll take your phone and they'll tell you, we want to download stuff from your phone and we want to give us your passwords or whatever. And I remember this conversation happening on Facebook between a lot of white people complaining about that. And I said, what are you guys complaining about? They're not going to do that to you. They're going to do that to me. Why are you so worried this might happen to you? Like the possibility of it happening to you and you getting into trouble for it. But funnily enough, I don't know, Catherine, I don't know if you're okay with me sharing this, but I didn't get Chris this time around coming out of the airport because Catherine was standing right behind me. I usually, like 50% of the time, I get chosen for a random check in the airport, and usually in the UK, getting out of the UK, usually from Manchester Airport, they frisk me really badly. It's really, really a demeaning experience. But it didn't happen to me this year. Catherine was right behind me, so she knows that it didn't happen to me. But the thing is, with this thing about give me your passwords, that's something that they're saying now. That this is happening. It's not hypothetical that they would do that to you. They would actually do that. And I got an extra phone that I didn't want to install a lot of stuff on just to make sure that I don't have to move over a phone like that. But it's a really weird thing to have to do. And it's not that I have something to hide, it's that I don't know what it is I have that I should hide, that I don't know about. Like what if a friend of mine has the same name as a terrorist? You know what I mean?
Well,
what if someone calling me on Twitter?
The really messed up thing is that we've accepted the frame that we've been given for this, and I'm super apologize because I'm not sure if this is sort of what the virtually connected was supposed to be talking about. But once we start talking about privacy, I kind of nerd out. But the problem is that we've accepted the frame of this, right? So someone said, "Well, I don't have anything to hide," and now people repeat that. but that's not really the issue, right? I mean, first of all, in terms of how rights work, it's not whether or not I have something to hide. It's whether or not, like, I am obliged to show you something. Like, that's how rights work, or at least, like, how they're supposed to work. But the other thing is, we've all had hilarious instances where we get served some ad or some message or some promoted tweet that's completely absurd and has nothing to do with who we are. Well, that's super funny when, you know, like, I get an ad for what's an owlet, right? Which is like a baby, it's some kind of baby uniform or something. Because I was talking about owls on Twitter. And so now I'm getting all these like ad promoted tweets about babies. Well, that's really funny, haha. But the problem is that when those are the same types of algorithms that are also making assumptions about whether or not I'm a security risk, or whether or not you know, I should get a loan, or whether or not I should be surveilled by the police. So like, that framework of sort of whether or not we have something to hide is not appropriate, because that's, again, that's not how rights work. But more importantly, that as Kate mentioned before, like, we don't have the things that are making decisions about us based on these mounds of data. We can't see them. They're not accountable. We can't audit them. You know, people in high-powered places are, you know, in the words of a government official, like, we kill people on metadata, right? So we kill people based on metadata. So it's important to, I think, kind of shift the way of looking at it a little bit, because it's not that whether or not I'm guilty of anything, it's like how I get judged based on things that are completely outside of my control.
Okay, Yin, I think, yeah, you have to run. It was great to have you. Bye. This might be a bit out of context, but I hope I'll bring it home. A friend of mine is a psychology professor, and he did a study last year. I think he will even be on television, on German television for it. And in the study, he basically asked his students to, in a controlled setting, as psychologists tend to do, he made his students ask other students for their passwords of social media accounts, and they offered treats for that. So they got like a Snickers or something. And I mean, we can buy Snickers in Germany, just to clear that up. So it's not that valuable, but still. And I would have to look it up, and I'm not even sure if it's published in English, but a really astonishing number of students gave up their social media passwords to do whatever they wanted to do with it. And this is, and it is out of context because this is a completely different threat, but it also made me think about when you think of privacy or safety or security, it's not always about you. I think Ken Bauer made that point in some conversation, I don't even know where, but it's also about the people in your network, right? So if you are a teacher like Ken, for example, and you have thousands of people, or even a system administrator, and you have thousands and thousands of people in your address books, on your email servers, or wherever they are, you are somewhat obliged to care about that as well. And how does that then relate to, or how you could even get cynical about this and ask how do you keep motivated while a psychology professor in Germany is doing a study where they hand out their passwords for Snickers, right? So and again, no question here, but just putting out, I will have to go and look for that study, and I'm pretty sure it's only in German, but who knows? I'll ping him and see if he has it in English as well. And this is very much, I think that's again where your Kate work comes in, and where where we need to find ways of making these issues more visible and these questions more visible, that a password is not something you give out, but also that you protect not only yourself, but others with it. I mean, giving out your Facebook credentials pretty much exposes everybody of your friends as well.
Yeah, this kind of ties into like network privacy, I guess, which is something that I've really come across Dana Boyd talking about. And yeah, I mean, it's we don't want to dwell too much into this conversation. I can go on like Chris. I can go on and on and on about this. But so the class that I ran, the idea was that it was kind of like a game. So we didn't want to disclose the actual location of where we were, and so everybody kind of had to follow these very strict rules that I gave for them to be able to do that. And there was a slip up, and it was a good time to have a slip up, I suppose, because it was such a tiny mistake, but just having the opportunity to kind of explain that it just takes one small error, right? But in terms of thinking about our networks and things, I know for a fact that my network say an awful lot about me because of the ads that come up and those sorts of things. But yeah, not really sure where I'm going with that, but I guess kind of which relates to your anecdote about this, is that I was once at a university in the student union, and I was meant to be kind of, I don't know, giving leaflets out for something, I suppose. But then next to me there was an app and an app stand. I can't remember what the app was, but it's something like an anonymous sort of chat thing that bases you on your location. And then they were giving out free socks, saying, download the app and you get a pair of free socks. And these socks were super cool. I was just kind of saying, hey, trying to like muscle my way into it. And said, well, you have to get the app. I said, well, okay, well, give me a few minutes. And I kind of looked through the terms and conditions and the privacy policy. And I was like, man, this is just not worth it. So, which was a bit awkward for them when I had to explain to them why I was saying no. But yeah, I mean, it's just this warped idea of, again, consent, that the benefits always seem to certainly outweigh the costs, and having a conversation about those costs is important. So I think people are trying to go, not trying to go, but so if we can start to wrap this up, maybe. I know this is yeah.
I think we were planning for this to go around about 60 minutes, and we are heading towards the 75th minute now. I'm right about that. Yeah, is just anything left to say? Anything on anyone's mind actually that you want to share, or is that a good point for us to wrap it up? I'm not sure.
Just a very quick thing that we've been talking about in the text chat is just that how the people who actually develop the algorithms and the computer scientists, and three of us here, Catherine and I think, I don't know if Catherine still is, but I used to be, and Ahmed still is. And we're talking about how we don't talk about the basics of these things and the consequences of what we're doing. We don't learn it in college. And I was asking Ahmed if people talk about it now. And he was saying, actually, for the most part, they don't. And I think that's a problem in itself, right? Because we're all here trying to understand what it is they're doing, but we're not doing it. But people who are doing it aren't having these discussions.
I think in computing science we are so fond of technology, we don't think much about the consequences. We just want to make things happen and enjoy the technology. And yeah, we don't have as many conversations about privacy and surveillance and stuff like that as I think we should have. So the geekiness overrides the concerns, I'm afraid.
Well, and for me, I'm just realizing that once again, we're dealing with a lot of paradox. And I think in these cases where we have this, one of the things that's most important is that we have these conversations, that we talk about these things openly. And if, maybe we can encourage more computer scientists to have these conversations through our conversations and dragging them into these conversations, as the case might be. So I just wanted to say thank you, Christiane and Kate, for organizing this, for organizing the workshop at OER 17, as well as extending it through virtually connecting by doing a MISC conversation. This has been wonderful.
Funnily enough, this has been a lot longer than the workshop itself. I just want to put that out there. We need a longer slot next time. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, we wanted 90 minutes, didn't we? Sorry, Autumn.
I was just going to say, I think it's even bigger than 90 minutes. And but I think that you guys have a budding community here, and I think that's great. Sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
Yep, I mean, I know we're over time. I just want to say thanks very much. And again, it was my disappointment not to participate in the workshop, but Christian, I did, as you say, in the early days. It was OER 16, participated in the workshop. So I've been peripherally aware of the Towards Openness hashtag and what you're both doing since then. So this Hangout has been really great to kind of engage in that conversation, and I hope to continue.
All right, then. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, go on.
All right. Well, thanks you all for coming. I know you don't have too much time on your hands as well. Really enjoyed the session, both the session and the workshop, and I think both Kate and I will work on writing some stuff up. And please, if you feel any need to do so, let us know, and we'll be happy to cross post. But also. We'll just see where this goes and where it takes us, and I think we'll be in conversations of what we'll be doing next, and we'll let you know. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great meeting you all for the first time, most of you. Good night.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Good night.